Like, you're not going to be reckless with this stuff. As an owner, your job is to mitigate risk. So as an owner, you're like, if a great analogy I heard before is just like, there's two-way door and there's one-way door decisions. It's just like, if we walk through this door, can we walk right back into the room we were in, right? Those are decisions maybe you pass on to your team and your leadership team. They can make those decisions. Walk out, hey, no worries, just walk back in. As the owner of the company, right, your job is to make those one-way door decisions. It was just like, if we go through this door, there's no coming back. And in order to do that, we need to really mitigate as much risk. You can't eliminate it. And that's why most owners aren't successful, because you're wired to be primal human beings, right? We default to negative because our body's fight or flight. We're trying to prevent ourselves from getting hurt. So we don't want to be successful. Success is the opposite of how we're wired. Right. So number 4 is thou shalt not open another location unless they're oversubscribed, right? Now, the reason why I mentioned this, Dave, is because we're not private equity. We don't have a war chest, right? And Daddy Warbox isn't coming to help us out. Maybe for some people that are fortunate, but like for me, like I was born poor. Like my mom and dad, they worked. My dad worked hard in multiple jobs and stuff, but wealth didn't come from my family, right? But you know, I realized that wealth could come from me, but I need to be smart about it. And one of the things that people don't realize is that, like, if you're not oversubscribed, you when you go to open another location, those de novos that you mentioned, you're just like, well, there's nobody here. I gotta ramp up marketing and I gotta do other things, and I don't have enough time if we don't get this thing up and running. However, if you have an oversubscription, you could then take about 10, 20, 30% of that oversubscription and just move it into the new location. And then you could pretty much fill 1, possibly 2 providers really, really quickly. We just had this happen out in California. They opened in April, and now they're on to their 3rd provider, and they opened in April, so June 21st, filming of this podcast, right? 2.5 months, just because they had so much oversubscription at Clinic 1. When they opened 2, they were maxed out. And now when they open, it was just like, boom, first provider full as soon as they open. Second provider full for 6 weeks. Third provider, it's 2 months in. Now we need to get that over. So that's why it's cool to leverage that. Obviously, for time purposes, you could do like a heat map. You could kind of see where your location is. There's other things to figure out where to open, but you want to use some of that equity, right? That goodwill you already purchased and or built, and move that over. But I'll stop there for a second. Any questions on that? It's good.
So what's the definition? How do you define oversubscribed or oversubscription? Would it be a waiting list of X amount, or how do you like extra demand, or people like calling you from further away? Like, how do you define oversubscribed?
Yeah, so they're subjective and objective. We're very objective, so you have to be, because if not, your emotions could get the best of you here, because you think you might be oversubscribed, but then you're just in a weird seasonal thing, right? You're just oversubscribed because it's the spring, but then you start to get to the summertime and the schedule starts falling apart. So depending on your scheduling, and when we're looking at this thing, it's just like, let's just use an example here of if you're one-on-one for an hour treatment. You're doing one-on-one for an hour, which is basically about like 40 slots a week. You can do 40 slots. Now you could determine, do we want to see people like once every other week, once a week, twice a week, or 3 times a week? I'm not here to discuss what the subscription, like I tell my clients, you treat how you want to treat, it's up to you. However, if you want to do less patients a little bit more often, get better results, there's some merit to doing it one way or another. But if you're at 40 slots once every other week, you need 80 active patients to fill a schedule. If you're at 40 slots once a week, that's 40. If you're out twice a week with 40 slots, that's 20 active patients that you need. And then 3 times a week is only 14. So I could sit here and be like, well, does your admins want to do 14 or 80? Right? Does your providers want to do 14 or 8? So you could go through it, but law of averages, most patients are going to come 3 times a week, right? Hopefully you're not seeing people once every other week. So kind of right in the middle there, that 1 to 2 times a week is what we see. ATI did a really nice study, regardless of how you feel about some of the, but they're doing 200,000 visits a week. Like, you should listen to some of their data. So ATI did a study. Basically, they said that, like, hey, if a patient was to come, like the drop off, it was a drop off study. And they basically said that when patients are seen greater than 7 days between appointments, they have like a 60 to 70% chance of dropping off the schedule. All right. So in order to mitigate that, if you have people coming in twice a week, you reduce the amount of times they'll no-show cancel. It'll increase the amount of times they arrive. If they're arriving, hopefully you're getting them better. And then that way they actually end up ditch. So let's just use 2 visits a week as like our buffer. So let's just say you have a clinic and you're doing 40 slots twice a week scheduling. Well, you need 20 active patients to fill a schedule, right? If you have 4 providers, that's all you can fit in there. You need 80. Oversubscription is when you have 100, 120. 130, but you only need 80, right? We have all this, right? So that clinic out in California was 100 active patients over what they needed. And I already knew based on their scheduling, that's 2 people we could fill up. We just need the providers and more space. So sometimes it's just like, how many active patients do we need? Is the schedule filled up? Are we oversubscribed? We maxed out. So hopefully that's good. So if anybody needs clarification, throw it in the comments and we'll come back and answer them. So,
I love it. I love it. For owners watching or listening, like they can just track number of active patients through their EMR, right? Like for that list.
Yeah.
Pretty simple to know like who is active right now, someone that hasn't been discharged, someone that hasn't totally dropped off, whatever. So truly active patients in your EMR, who's currently active.
Yeah. And sometimes the verbiage there gets a little wonky, Dave, just because some EMRs call it like I think definitions matter. My definition of an active patient. So we have a new patient, we have an active patient, we have a past patient. And an active patient could either be engaged or not engaged, right? So because you could have an active patient, right? They're an active patient. They should actively be coming in. They have a plan of care. They should be scheduling out their appointments, but either they're coming for their appointments or they're not coming, right? They're adhering to their plan of care. Dave tells them like hey, you want max possible benefits here? You're coming in 3 times a week. Well, I just want to come in once a week, right? So there's some people that have like, they're adhering to their full plan of care, their partial plan of care. There's some people that are only scheduling 1 visit at a time, or they're coming in once a week when they should be coming in 3. There's some people that are coming in no times a week. They're coming in every other week, and then they're complaining they're not getting results. There's some people that just don't come in at all for whatever reason. And going back to that study, that drop off, and I want to make sure I give you some tactical stuff here too. No shows, cancels, back to back, 2 in a row. It's like a 70% chance they're going to drop off the schedule. So you could see it. It's like they came for eval, they came for 2, they came for 3, canceled on 4, came for 5, cancel, done. It's like you can see it, right? So if you're doing something, and we do this with a lot of our clients, it's called active patient reporting. It's just like every Thursday, you should sit down and be like, who's supposed to be coming in? And do they have a plan of care? Are they adhering to their plan of care? Or are they not? And if they're not, we better get them on the phone a little bit and be like, hey, right? Before I didn't want to go down patient care stuff, but there's a law of entropy. Yeah. Don't ask Dave. I was a meteorology major, didn't go well, decided to be but I learned this law of entropy where it says everything left to itself moves more and more towards chaos. So we know that most patients do not want to come to physical therapy. Like they literally say on the last visit, like, hope I never see you again. And you're like, oh yeah, haha. Even though you're in your head, you're like, I need you to come back 5 times. It's like,
I need your lifetime value.
I need your lifetime value, right? And honestly, when you're doing evaluation, one thing that we never get additional stuff for is do 80% of your clients pay you the next year? Like when I didn't realize that. So when you're doing evaluation of like a company, one of the little things that they had there was just like, hey, what's the percentage of your patients that pay you year to year? And then the guy just laughed. He's like, yeah, PT's always at 0. You don't get any points for that. I was like, well, hold on a second. Well, how do I get points for that? Right? He goes, well, think Netflix, right? They just keep recurring. They don't stop. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, maybe we can't be Netflix, but that's a topic for a different day. Maybe we could tap into that. But when we're looking at this thing, yeah, people don't want to be there. They literally say like, when is this over?
Grudge purchase sometimes.
Yeah. They don't want to be there, but that's okay. We'll still love them anyway. So that's where we're at. So just to recap, we got owner out of treatment. We have leadership team in place. We're maxing out the facility. There's some equations behind that and some math to figure out like how many tables we get. Small, really quick tactical thing. All that cardio equipment, all that weird stuff you got in there, it's probably costing $20K a month. So look around, see what you're not using, get rid of it, put a table in. It's just like, so max out the space, get a little oversubscribed, right? Now, the number 5 is going to be a reserve. You have to get a reserve in place. We like to self-fund things, right? So we like to self-fund, build out, self-fund, getting the equipment. I'm not a big loan guy. I'm not a big like take out a loan to join a program. I'm not a big like take out a loan to pay somebody a lease. I am a big take out a loan to buy the building guy, which usually happens around like building number 3 or 4, clinic number 3 or 4. You have enough capital coming in here to start looking at buying the buildings, which is a different play in itself. Because when you do sell your business, you still keep the buildings, which is pretty cool. Also, when you sell your business, there's something called taxes, called capital gains. But if you do a 1031 exchange and some of that stuff to get into buildings and real estate, there's a play there. But again, talk to your lawyers and CPAs about that. But at the same time,
any of these tangents by episodes on each of these tangents. Go ahead, keep going.
Oh, there we go. Well, and I told you, man, I'm a huge fan of the show. So I'm hitting things that people are like having questions with. I'm just like, go back to like all the shows. Like, so there's where we're at. So ultimately, when you're looking at it, there's just big level plays. Like people want to get wealthy, but they don't realize that wealth is built as you stay in the game long enough and keep growing this thing. Right? It's a machine. It's pretty cool, right? People are like, how much money you got in your 401k? I'm like, I got no money there. I'm just diving it into my businesses. Because if I can keep compounding and betting on myself and stay in the game long enough, like, let's go, right? So if you get to the point where you go to open, reserves are important. You got to buy the build out, you got to buy the tables, you got to pay for expenses, the payroll stuff, you got to hire. So I think that's pretty self self-explanatory. How much should people have? I would say anywhere between about like 35 to like 75K saved in a reserve before you go to open another location. You could have more, you could have less. I'm not a big 100K build out guy. Like that's just, I don't know. Is it going to work? I don't know. But less is more. Just kind of get in there. You could always add stuff once you're in the space, but that's just where we're at. So reserve is number 5. And number 6 kind of just got added this year, because what happens when you don't do number 6, you go back to number 1. And if you remember number 1, owner shall not treat, right? Guilty of this. Open clinic number 3, had someone lined up. 2 weeks before opening, she said, hey, I hate to do this, but I'm going to go work somewhere else because they're offering a residency. I'm sure that triggered some people here, because we've all lost someone to a fellowship or residency, unless you offer fellowship or residencies. But then she said, hey, I'm not going to come in. I'm going to go work somewhere else. They offer residency. Totally fine, right? But at the same time, I had to go and treat at the 3rd location, which crushed some of the management and stuff, because I was also, doing that and running meetings at 1 and 2. Now I have to go out and treat full time. So number 6 is thou shalt not open if thou can't hire. So if you can't hire people, more specifically 2 providers. So I always tell people this, like opening a clinic and putting 1 provider in, you basically break even, assuming they're full. Full for us is like 80% efficiency, right? Arrivals divided by slots. We want 80 per, right? So you should be able to set your clinic up to be profitable with like a 14% no-show cancellation rate built in. But the first provider covers your payments, your fixed payments. The second provider is where you start making profit. So we don't want to open a clinic if we can't get 2 providers in there. And I think that that's really important. So if you're struggling to hire at clinic 1, like if you're going to open clinic 2, you have to strategically pick a location that might be closer to schools. They might have a little bit more towards the cities versus out in rural. Like where are people actually, like look at the map and see like where all the PT clinics are, because there's at least 1 or 2 providers there that come work for you. So you got to be a little strategic about it. Dave, maybe another, like, how do you pick a location? That could be another podcast. But right now it's just like, just knowing that when you open, a lot of owners sit there and they're like, oh, that's why like the first provider, yeah, I only have 1 provider there and I'm not making any money. It's like, yeah, because you need more. It's unfortunately PT is a little bit of a volume game. So if you don't have volume, you're not going to be profitable. So that's kind of where we at, man. But yeah, go ahead, Dave.
So I love that idea of having 2 providers to open the next location, which is not easy. And that's a whole other conversation of recruiting. And you should already have had, this is the assumption of like, you already have a bench of resumes and candidates that you've maybe been talking to recently or for weeks or months or whatever. And also if you have 2 providers for that next location, it hedges your risk level of when an owner could still find themselves in your situation where the one of the providers says, actually, I got a better opportunity, or my husband is in the military, just got transferred, whatever, like all these things 100%. Happen. And so you could still open that location. You just went from 2 to 1, because if you went from 1 to 0, like that location's screwed. But at least I feel you could kind of maybe get by a little bit with opening. If you have 2 and at the last second, it's just 1, you could still maybe do some magic and kind of push through and grind that opening with the 1 until you find the next therapist, the next provider. That's not easy, but that's a great way to mitigate risk with opening that next location. Start having the plan around 2, but again, it's not easy with recruiting. And then of course they would need you and Joey or somewhere else to ramp up the new patients as well.
Yeah, and that's awesome points, because like, and I'm only telling people this for more expectations. I really think that clarity is like one of the better gifts that you give somebody, right? I think a lot of owners out there right now are like they're just hiring and hoping, and then they just kind of come in their clinic and they're like, I've been at this for 10 years. I guess I'm just not going to be successful. But when like you have a strategy and a blueprint here, you're like, oh, if all I have to do is get out of treatment, get my leadership in place, get this, and this, I could start taking actionable steps here. And we're not saying open a second location and then have 2 providers lined up. It's just like, well, no, have at least 1 provider lined up, get them full. But the expectation is that you shouldn't be making money, right? You might make a couple bucks here and there, but you shouldn't be making, like, you got to pay the building, the utilities, you got to pay the payroll, you got to pay the admin, you got to pay first marketing things. Like, you're not profitable with 1, but when you get 2 in there and now you're making, let's just say like 40K top line revenue per month at that location, and then your expenses are about like 13K per provider, right? You're at 26K total. So now you got 40 and 26. Now you're making a couple extra bucks. Now you add a third one and you're at 60 and 39, and you're at 80 and 52. Now you're having some success there. But I think I haven't mentioned it, and I'm very blunt with people, because when I first started coaching, I danced around some things, but now I'm just like, hey, like, could I coach you a second? You need a close location. Like we're just very like, this is as a matter of fact. And I know that there's like leases and stuff, and we got to we can't just walk in and close and you still got, right? So what I tell people all the time, and the reason I look back and I said, like, why did you have 3 locations and like not follow that blueprint? And I think it always came back to one word and one word only. It's because of status. I think a lot of times it was really cool for me to tell people I had 3 locations, even though I didn't have to tell people that I was struggling behind the scenes with all 3 locations. Like, it was like, I'm embarrassed of the owner I was, and I get emotional about it, but like, I'm embarrassed of the owner I was when I had 3 locations. Like, I'm a different owner now, and hopefully my team appreciates just like who I'm transforming and becoming, but it was not good. It's like, I had a persona there that, like, hey, Robbie's got it together. But behind the scenes, it was like, not really. And, I was learning like a lot of people learn. And hopefully I could do these things and just tell people, like, don't do what I did and make the mistakes that I did. Because it's not my success story. It's just like, just don't get the scars that I did. I'm okay with you getting a couple of scrapes and wounds and whatever. But, I just don't want you to get stitches. That's all. So
I was just about to joke and say a physical therapist and a practice owner would never have an ego around any of this, Robbie. They would never have an ego around that they're driving all the visits and all the patients are referred to them, and all of this. And of course, like, I didn't want to say it because then you got a little emotional with like how
you're
you
fine, man.
time.
I don't mind talking about it. You're fine, and we could joke about it now, but it's brutal. I had a little girl, and I don't. I asked my patients, you do home health, you could appreciate this. I did mobile too. I used to ask my older folks. I say, hey, what are the biggest mistakes in your life? Like, what would you say? Like 1, 2, 3. Like, what does that look like? And the first one was always travel. Like, I wish I traveled a little bit more when I was younger, right? So everybody kind of says that. The second one is I wish I spent more time with my kids when they were younger, because once they hit 18, they're out, and I'm still working. I didn't get to see them. And the third one is I wish I had kids. And I know some people can't have kids and stuff like that. So, we've had some issues. We had a couple miscarriages and stuff. So there's 8 billion people in the world, right? So people take that for granted, but it's hard. It's difficult. And when you do have them, it's even harder, right? So we even got some people in our program that have like kids with special needs, and I have no clue how they're doing what they're doing, which is crazy. So, when I sit there and I'm like my first daughter, when I had my clinics, like, I barely saw Hartley for the first 3 years, like barely. And, it's one of those things that, like, if I could get owners a couple more times back, couple more moments and stuff like that, that's to me what it's about. But I do know that the reason why, like, I'm in groups and I was around other people and they had multiple clinics, and I was like, I got to keep up. Like, I'm competitive. I got to get clinics. And because of that, like, I got myself in a position where, like, it was very status driven. And, even my parents, like, it crushes them now that I don't even have, well, maybe not my dad, but my mom for sure. Like, my mom used to be like, my son got 3 locations. It's like, she's like, now I get on calls. She's like, how's that thing you're doing? Like, how's that work? Like, you feel the defeat, right? So it's just one of those things that, like, status is important. So the reason why I tell that is I would hate for anybody to be in a position that has 3 locations with 2.5 providers, right? Or they have 4 locations with like 5 people working spread out, and you're working all the time at one. So we could prevent people. And if you're here on this and you're like, oh, like, that's me, like, I was you 100%. But now you kind of figure out, like, okay, well, now I know that I have to get to at least a couple layers between me and my business, get a couple more hires here and there. And ultimately, it's just like, how can we turn this thing from where we're at right now, which might be a little chaotic, right? Might be a little tight on money. Hopefully you guys aren't like in survival mode where you can't pay your personal or business expenses. That's a miserable place to be. A lot of people start there when they start their businesses, but the quicker you can get out of survival mode and get into comfort level when it comes to financials, it's nice. When you can pay your personal, you can pay your business, you got a little extra money. Then eventually, like, how could I pay my leadership team more? And how could I pay my team more? And then eventually you'll be able to figure out how could I give back to the community and all that other stuff. So Dave, I just appreciate you let me share that. hopefully someone found value in it. At least if we hit one, that's better than none. So there you go. So, but yeah, man. So thanks for having me on, and any questions you got, man. I'd love to jam out even more.
Absolutely. That was awesome. And so a little bit of like higher level things, but then also tactical. So thank you. I love to be just like actionable and tactical steps. So like even the tip around like what's your square footage and like what that kind of equates to depending on your schedule, like how many visits you could be completing and treating in your clinic. And definitely I love the cardio equipment and all that. And it's kind of weird with physical therapy with the cardio equipment and the gym equipment, right? Because Vince Gutierrez just posted like this week on LinkedIn. He said like he had a patient come into his clinic years ago and was like, how come there's no like gym equipment or like the big Swiss physio balls or whatever. And then for whatever reason, which I kind of disagree with, but Vince like went and bought physio balls and then told the patient like, hey, come back. I have the gym equipment stuff you were talking about. The patient comes back. They never used the gym equipment, the physio balls, anything. The patient stayed, you know, for the plan of care for years, whatever. And then Vince said like they took the physio ball off the wall, off a rack, and it like peeled the paint. It was up there for so long that it peeled the paint off the wall.
Been there,
So
done that.
I think now with like the maybe more Instagram and the newer age with a lot more movement and all that, like I definitely agree with that. Like there more space for like dynamic things for physical therapy, less of the gym equipment, but more space for tables, for evaluations, for treatment. So even that tactical step of like square footage, how much, you know, completed visits, maybe, you know, figure out some ways to get some more tables in there, get more providers in there, co-treat all that legally, compliantly. Even that, I love that tactical step. And we talked about a ton of other things. And any other recap? I mean, we covered a lot of ground.
Yeah, well, so great. I think this will be a good point to kind of like start wrapping up here. So I'll take you up a level to like, so I like to do principle, maybe a little strategy and tactical because I like to, so principle, right? You were mentioning like one patient said something, have to make some changes here. So that law of entry we mentioned earlier, everything moves towards disorder and chaos. You have to know that there's going to be a bottom 10% with everything you do, right? One time we had my front office ran in and she's like, we got to turn the emails off. And I was like, why? She's like, well, the text is going out and we got people complaining. I said, well, how many people are complaining? And she's like, we have like 4 or 5 people just in the last couple of days complain. I said, I sent out 10,000 emails. it's like we're not changing anything, right? So she's just like, oh, and I'm like, well, how many people are opting in and having conversations? And she's like, well, we had a lot of those. And I was just like, okay, well, let's focus on that. So 10% rule just basically means if 10% of your staff or 10% of your patients or 10% of whatever isn't really complaining, we're not really going to change. We're going to hear you. We're going to make sure we acknowledge and all that stuff. Awesome. But like, you know, when it comes to policy procedure changes, we see a lot of knee-jerk whiplash management, stuff like that. It's just like, hey, right, I hear you. Thank you for that information. But maybe you don't have all the information here. And so be very careful when you hear things and you know, change management. So the other thing Joey says, and I love this from Joey, he's just like, close your eyes for a second. He's like, imagine you have 100 locations. Would you put an Alter G in every single location? And it's just like, well, no. Well, then why would you put it in one? Right. So if you think of it, right. So close your eyes for a second. Shockwave therapy, which I love Shockwave, by the way. So it's just like Shockwave therapy.
It works on my shoulder.
It works great, right? So it's just like Shockwave therapy.
And I know what you're going to say, because Joey posted a while ago. He said something like, if you don't have it in all your locations, why would you only have it in like one?
Yeah. Now you might sit there and be like, I'm 100% having Shockwave. It's like, okay, cool. Well, then have it in, right? But we had an owner. They're like, hey, I'm thinking about opening aquatic therapy. Why? Well, because we have some space and people are asking for it. I was like, do you know how much money that, like the maintenance and this, and then providers don't want to get the pool and well, it's more reimbursement. I was like, there's more things that you could do reimbursement wise, like than getting a pool, right? So let's hold on a second. But sometimes we just, you know, when we're in that survival mode, we're trying to grasp for something and we're trying to do different things, but realistically, it's just like the blueprint's there. It's just like, you know, especially when you're trying to get an owner on a treatment, like you need layers between you and your business. And we could talk about that, just kind of how to remove owners and how many PTs you need and different things like that. But ultimately, it's just like there's math behind it, and it's not that hard for people to get to certain levels and have a significantly different life than they have just a couple months ago by taking those actionable steps. So yeah, awesome stuff.
How about maybe briefly, an owner that's watching or listening that said they're afraid of the financial dip, taking themselves out of patient care, and maybe they need to have better follow visits, like they're having too many patients drop off of their other providers. That goes back to coaching and training, and maybe even on the onboarding side, but the ongoing training and even front desk retraining with preventing these cancellations, these drop offs, all that. What about an owner that's afraid of a personal financial dip when they're taking themselves out of producing revenue? Obviously, it all comes down to what's the profitability of the practice, and maybe there's a reimbursement and coding issues. I mean, there could be a lot of factors in that. Any tips, anything like high level or even tactical for an owner that's afraid of that?
If you're asking, we'll go off of that. So you'll get kind of the way I like to break. Like I like to do principle first, and then we'll break it down, because then I think most people could benefit from that, because it's always like, cool, got it. But then, you know, why do we do it? And then how do we do it? Principle level, like there's a principle out there that it's the law of advancement, right? The law of advancement basically means that like you have to go down before you go up, and disruption is going to follow intention. You guys are going to be like, I can't tell you how many people like we work with, and they'd be like, you know, hey, Dave Kittle, kiddo, like, when's your retirement date from treatment? They set their date, and then all of a sudden it's just like, the message us in Slack and be like, hey, got to move my date back. And I'm like, why? What happened? They're like, well, my PT just quit. All right. Or they'll be like, hey, I just hired my new PT. And I'm like, yes, that's incredible. And they're putting all their focus there. And they're like, do you have a job ad for a patient care coordinator? I'm like, why? What happened there? And they're like, right. So there's right. Or we're opening up a new location and we have to now get an occupancy permit because, New York City, right? So there's these things that come up. So whenever you go to do something, you need to know that when you look at the business success curve, it's like you do go down before you go up. And it just, you have to know it's there. We don't call it like, and you can get a little defeated in there, like the circle of despair thing, but I just look at it as a slingshot, just to pull back, right? We got to go down a little bit. Your bank account will go down before you go up. We can mitigate that risk by having reserves in place. Like, you're not going to be reckless with this stuff. As an owner, your job is to mitigate risk. That's it. So as an owner, you're like, if a great analogy I heard before is just like, there's two-way door and there's one-way door decisions. It's just like, if we walk through this door, can we walk right back into the room we were in, right? Those are decisions maybe you pass on to your team and your leadership team. They can make those decisions. Walk out, hey, no worries, just walk back in. As the owner of the company, right, your job is to make those one-way door decisions. Like, it's just like, if we go through this door, there's no coming back. And in order to do that, we need to really mitigate as much risk as you can, eliminate it. And that's why most owners aren't successful, because you're wired to be primal human beings, right? We default to negative because our body's fight or flight. We're trying to prevent ourselves from getting hurt. So we don't want to be successful. Success is the opposite of how we're wired, right? So I think that's really interesting. So just remember, law of advancement, you're going through the levels now. And I hope we're okay on time. I'm good on time. If you're good on time, I'll jam out of this for a second. If you want to remove yourself, because the first one was like owner out of treatment. You got to get the owner out of treatment. The math has to work. Joey always says your math ain't math. So when you start off as a solo owner, right, the very first hire that we look at, as far as this is the strategy behind it, the very first person that you look at hiring is an admin. And we see people hiring a PTA, we see people hiring a PT. There's a lot of conversation out there, but I've known what happens when you bring a PTA on or another PT. There's no one there to call the leads and handle those and do the scheduling and stuff. So in order to fill two providers, well, your new provider doesn't want to call leads. You kind of don't want to call leads as the owner. So someone needs to coordinate care. So that's why we do owner admin. And there's some instances where, yes, there's some exceptions there, but majority of the time it's owner admin. Trust me, it'll make your life 100 times easier. We always see it like solo owners, when they hire their admin, they're like, thank you. And I'm like, you're welcome. So it's like, thank you. This is the best thing in the world, right? Then what you want to do is you hire your next PT, your first PT. That covers your payments. Remember what we talked about, fixed payments, that covers your fixed. The second provider that you get, so it's owner treating, full schedule. You got a first provider, full schedule. Second provider, full schedule. So now you got 3 providers total, or yourself as the owner included. And then now that level there is called profitability. That's our profit level. Because now we got 3 providers working. And remember, the end game is to get the owner out of treatment. But that provider there is profit level, meaning that all that money that's coming through, we should have some level of profitability there. If we get it, then instead of hiring another provider, we have to get an admin in there. This is a tactical thing, and this is a writer-downer. 110 visits per admin, what most rockstar admins can handle, okay? Most admins, we had an owner once, she's like, my admin's not doing well. And I said, oh gosh, why? What's going on? And she's like, I just don't know if she could keep up with things anymore. She just doesn't have what she used to have. And I said, okay, well, hold on a second. Well, how many FTEs do you got? Provider FTEs. She said 5. And I said, well, how many admin FTEs do you got? And she goes, well, just her. I said, oh gosh. I said, it's not that she's doing bad. She's just such a good player. She doesn't want to tell you that she's overwhelmed, but please go give that person some life support, right? You're going to run her into the ground. And she did. She got her helper and things are good now, but 110 visits per. That's why we do owner, admin, and then we do provider, admin, because now we have some protection there. And then we get a third provider in there. Now, assuming we have space, that's a different conversation. We get another provider in there. So now you get 3 providers, 2 admins, and now you're on a protection level. Meaning if an admin was to quit, you still have another admin. If a provider was to quit, you're still profitable, right? It's protection. And then the last level is where we get that 4th provider in, who then comes in, removes the owner from treatment. And now you got 4 providers, 2 admins, maybe we have tech floating around, but that's kind of the blueprint to successfully removing an owner from treatment, right? We had an owner the other day, they're like, I'm out of treatment, but I'm not making money. I said, okay, well, let's look at this. I said, how many FTEs do you have? And she said, well, we have 2 FTEs, providers, but I removed myself from treating. I said, but you're paying for 3 FTEs and you only have 2 working. So you're making $40K in revenue and you have $39K in expenses. That's why we're not the math ain't math. So that's kind of the blueprint. Anybody listening here now, some of you guys might be listening and you're like, hey, well, it's just me right now, and I don't know if I want 4 providers. There is a little bit of merit to then just doing that lifestyle business where it's just you and admin, maybe another provider, and you just chill, because you can't push through to get out of treatment. Getting out of treatment is earned, because when you get up to like 3 or 4 providers and 2 admins and a bunch of patients, and there's all this chaos and you don't have any time to manage any of it, you got to push through that really, really quickly. And once you get out, that's why getting out of treatment at that level is because it just pulls you back in. Dave, you were mentioning like what happens when you lose money or whatever. Like, it is going to suck you back into level 2 or 3 where you go back down to 1 or 2 providers. It happens all the time. So I don't know how much more you want me to jam on that or whatever questions you got, but hopefully that's the strategy. That's the blueprint for how to get there. So there you go.
That was awesome, dude. I love the, so if there's an owner that's, solo and growing, owner, admin, then provider, admin. I love that. I love it. It's very simple. And there's a lot of talk online of like, who to hire on your first hire. And I love the admin route first. And then, I mean, you laid out a ton of things and you've been super generous with your time. I think I want to make sure that we have time just to review, because you guys are offering like a ton of free content, I think, on school. So like, obviously you and Joey, like, easy to find rehab CEOs, easy to find you guys all over the internet. What's a good place for them, whether it's your website or any like Facebook group or any other place, or the school account where they can kind of log in and kind of see a ton of free things and get an even more ton of free value than even what you're offering here?
Yeah, well, a couple of different things. First off, not so much us, but because I put out a good amount of content and Joey does too. And if you guys are watching Dave Kittle's podcast and you guys are lingerers, which is totally fine, right? Give this man a little kudos here, right? Subscribe to his stuff, but also in the comment section, just blow it up. Let him know that you actually you appreciate the content. You guys actually appreciate what he's doing, showing up for you guys. He doesn't have to. He's got a little boy at home. He's got businesses to run, but he's over here pouring into you guys. So not so much for me, but just for Dave, because it gives us energy, right? Is anybody watching this thing? Anybody listening? We see your views and stuff like that, and Dave's crushing it. He's doing really well. But my ask for the audience is just show this man some love and throw some comments in there, which is awesome. Dave, I can give you a link for our school community. We're easy to find. Go over to SKOOL, type in rehab CEOs. We have over 300 videos in there. How to sell custom planet cares. We have all the stuff that we laid out here, how to hire your admin, stuff like all the way up to your first provider, because that's our community content. And we want people to like come in, either mobile sublease or they launch their own clinic and then they get their admin first provider. Like, that's so hard in itself. Like, you don't need to pay us money because you need that money to do that stuff, right? So we give it away for free. People are like, how are you giving away this for free? It's because, well, I wish someone gave it away for free for me, because I didn't have some of this information. And then ultimately, like, when you're in there, you're consuming. If you like it, we have some 2 free calls a week you could hop on as well. But again, guys, if you guys are loving the podcast and stuff, show Dave some love here, because Dave, I love it. I'm pumped to be here, because I was just like, yes, when you reached out, you're like, you want to be on? I'm like, absolutely, because I watch your stuff all the time, man. So hopefully
I truly appreciate it. Robbie did not get paid to say that. I'm not twisting his arm remotely.
No.
I truly appreciate you saying that, man. You're a mensch. And I've been, I reached out a while ago to get you on. I know you guys are both busy. I think so. From this, by the way, I'm like looking at the things that we've covered already, and I have like at least 8 other topics. And I'm depending on your not for today, for another day, but I don't know, like, I don't know what would make sense. Like, so I'll put some of these topics over Messenger. I'll send you some ideas. And maybe some solo things, and then maybe an episode or 2 like with you and Joey together, because I would love to kind of see you guys together, because you guys are doing a ton to help PTs and rehab owners out there. And so what you're doing is awesome, and you guys definitely need to go check out the free valuable stuff. And then obviously just naturally, and I haven't gone into it. I need to make an account, and I got to go check out what you guys are doing there at school.
Oh, cool. Yeah, make an account. I'll invite you in.
Because I'm sure owners that check that out, I know it's going to be valuable, because what you and Joe, what you guys do, you put your names behind it, your efforts and all that. The free stuff is probably going to blow these owners away. And then it's like, well, this is the free stuff. Then obviously, can you imagine like on the other side of like what you guys offer?
We have 2 like paid programs. Number 1 is to remove key man risks, right? That's what we do. So we help people in our Legacy Black program take an owner from solo owner with an admin and provider and get them 4 providers and out of treatment. And that's a cool program, man. Like, I'm pumped. We got a couple people right now that have been in for just about a year or so, and they've already have like 3-4 providers hired, and they're setting their retirement date. So, it's one thing to do it, but then to see other people like go through it, you're like, like, let's go. So that's why I said, like, we have people going through this stuff. And that's why I mentioned that, like, yeah, you could do other things. You could hire a PTA first. You could hire whatever. And PTAs, just to be very clear, we got PTAs on here. Love you guys, right? We used to have 4 PTAs working with us, but not yet. Not the first provider, not the second. That third, fourth provider, bring on the PTAs. We love them. Right. So because we want 2 or a 3-to-1 ratio of providers that could do evals to funnel into a PTA. Right. Because if we're trying to get the owner out of treatment, it's not a knock on the PTAs. It's just like you can't help an owner get out of treatment yet until a couple of, okay. So just want to make sure. And if you're a PTA trying to open up your own location, like, you just have it a little bit harder because you need someone else to do your eval. So that's where it's just like, we might have some things there. And then our other one there, our back end programs, we help people open multiple locations. And, I kind of was a little, sometimes you get, what's the word for that? When you don't think you're good enough, right? You only have 3 locations. Like, who am I to speak on opening multiple locations? Imposter syndrome, right? Yep. But, started this thing and I'm like, well, here's the blueprint on what I wouldn't have done, and you go do it. And then all of a sudden we see people just opening and filling really, really quickly. And then the benefit of that is now we have people with multiple locations, right? 7, 10, 15 locations that come in. And I love those guys because it's really small hinges to swing big doors, right? Small little things, little adjustments in scheduling or this and that. And all of a sudden you're like 90K more profitable in the month. And you're like, this is wild, right? So bigger guys have like small hinges, big doors, because we do know that change management is a thing and we can't just come in and change a bunch of stuff, right? So it's one of those things. So yeah, we have those 2 programs, but also just check out our free stuff. And, hopefully that resonated with you guys. And then Dave was mentioning some future topics, just throw in the chat right now. What was the takeaway? Was an aha? What did you resonate with? And maybe that'll be enough for Dave to want me back and we'll come in and we'll jam on some more stuff there. So awesome stuff.
I got it. Either you or Joey or both. I mean, packages or not, cash versus, I mean, we didn't even talk about insurance reimbursement and all that. And payment models or payment plans and financing and all that. Would love to kind of hear what you think of those types of topics. It's not easy out there for a lot of practice owners, but we did cover a lot of ground with expansion, with hiring, with getting yourself out of, getting yourself
we didn't even
out
talk about hiring, the hiring seasons, how to get more applicants during hiring seasons. Well, that's why people come in, they're like, there's a lot of videos, trainings, information. I'm like, yeah. It's like, because there's revenue, there's financials, there's hiring, there's how to manage your team, how to set expectations, how to do onboarding, how to, get your patients from eval to progress summary to discharge back. How the heck are we marketing the physician referrals, right? So that's the cool part about PT, man. And I guess we'll leave at this because, we're called rehab CEOs for the reason. The reason is I love to just see the owner transformation. We call about the patient transformation, but who the owner becomes, like, they come in a little beat up, survival mode, and then all of a sudden they get a little energy, and then all of a sudden they're starting to get results, they're starting to win again, they're starting to have fun again, and then all of a sudden, like, they become someone who demands the room and not demands it, but takes the attention there, and the team listens to them, and they're a leader, and it's just like, heck yeah. Like, we need more, and the people listening to this podcast are those people. And I know that because they're listening to this podcast. They want to succeed. They're not in Facebook groups, negative comment after negative comment. I've stopped going into Facebook groups.
Dude, the anonymous post.
Yeah, anonymous. Who are you? Show yourself.
I don't want to go on a tangent here, but why post anonymously on something that is not legal or compliant?
Well, maybe the owner's in there, or maybe I have no idea. Or maybe people just, I don't know. Or what I really think it is, maybe sometimes like coaches are in there trying to ask questions that they probably don't know answers to. It's like,
oh man, that could be, okay. That could be,
I have no idea. I have no clue, but all I know is when I'm getting there, like I'm a very big, like, where's my energy and how do I feel around things? And like when I'm in some of those groups and stuff, like I'm a high energy guy, and I like to think we're winning as a profession. And I get in there and I'm like, whoa, like, God, this is, if I look at that thing all day, it's just like, I might as well quit the profession tomorrow. But I can tell you right now, being in PT has blessed my family, has blessed my clients, has blessed their patients. It's a very positive thing. So be very careful with, be on with Dave, listen to his podcast, right? Get inspired with that stuff, take action and get some results. But if you're going back to the well of negativity in some of these groups, and what I love about Tony Maritato's group is he doesn't stand for any of that stuff. He's just like, yo, like, this is a positive group. I don't want to go down.
By the way, you and him need to talk. I would love to see him because he's in a place where he's got 2 locations. He's the only PT. He's got PTA.
Oh, cool. Awesome.
He's the only PT because his other PT just went on either maternity leave or I think maternity leave.
Yeah.
And I was on one of the episodes we did on Breakfast Club, I'm like, dude, you need to hire a PT. And he literally said he's not hiring a new PT because of the negative sentiment he sees in these groups. He needs Robbie Wolkers to plug into him.
We'll get him. We'll got you to Tony.
because I mean, he's got a great practice. It's been around, and I'm like, dude, you need to hire. And he doesn't want to deal with a PT that's looking like has all this negative sentiment and like high salary demands and work-life balance and that whole thing and all that. So,
well, Tony might be listening to this. So I'll tell Tony right now, a provider or a PT would be privileged to work for him.
100%.
100%. Because the amount of goodwill that he's got in the marketplace, and, you know, some people have congruency issues, but what I see Tony's doing and the thing, how he shows up and stuff, there is nothing incongruent about what he does. And I think that any single provider that would have an opportunity to have him as a mentor would just be like, that's one of, well, I know we could start jamming on more stuff. Structured mentorship. If you want providers, you have to have structured mentorship. It's what people want. We do. Why didn't you accept this position survey? And they're like, oh, well, I just didn't feel like the mentorship was there. All right, well, start doing structured mentorship program. Get a PowerPoint, put their little structured mentorship program up, and be like, this is what we're gonna do. But for someone to come in and work with Tony, are you kidding me? Is this like, so there you go. So we all, and that's cool to hear though too, because we all have something, some kind of belief around something. And, you know, for Tony to be around a group and a moderator and seeing all this stuff all day long, because he sees every comment. He's the moderators as a group. It does. And, you know, I'm blessed by my team. When we get anything in our thing or whatever, they don't tell me about it. They protect me from it, because I just need to go out and build and keep building and keep pouring in and keep communicating and keep whatever. And, you know, because I do know that like sometimes I do default to negative when I hear some stuff. We're not naive. We hear stuff all the time. 10% rule. You'll hear, you got 1,000 clients, you got 100% or 100 people that feel a certain way. But focus on the 900 that are happy and want to be there. You know, you got all these patients floating around. You got 100 patients coming in a week. 10 are going to be a little throwing your credit card at the front office. And, you know, here's my copay. Yeah. This is what it is. So, Dave, I appreciate, man. This has been awesome, and just very, very thankful for what you're doing for the profession as well. So we just need more people like yourself and Tony out there, and I think we'll be okay. So there you go.
Amen. Right on. And we got to get you back sometime soon around your busy schedule. Robbie Wolkers, Rehab CEOs, check out him, Joey, all the stuff that they're doing. Also, and you guys are on YouTube as well now recently.
Yeah, we're on YouTube trying to figure that out. So yeah, check us out on YouTube. We got some good videos, and Rusty and Steven that do a lot of our videos and stuff like that. They would really appreciate some feedback too. If you guys like the videos, like the content, comment, let us know.
You got to go over YouTube.com, Rehab CEOs, subscribe to the channel, get notified. They're publishing new episodes and new videos all the time. You and Joey sat down, I think, in person, and you created a whole bunch of content, and now it's all coming out, and I'm loving to follow along.
Yeah, content days. Maybe we'll have to jam on how to do your content. so how to
plenty of topics,
jam it out. So, well, Dave, I really appreciate it, man. So as always, dude, like just when I started on the podcast, I said, you know, I watch a lot of the videos that come out. I look forward to them. I love that you're just posting more often now, because I'm like, yes, I get more of Dave. So it's been great.
2 a week, dude. Structured. Yeah. It's coming out no matter what.
I noticed. So I was like, yes, we got 2 a week now. And as you guys could see listening to this, consistency is key. And Dave's building something really, really cool. And, you know, he doesn't have a hidden agenda here. He just wants to pour back into the community. And eventually, if you guys have something to sell, you might buy it from you. Who knows? Awesome stuff, guys. Well, I appreciate your time and attention for today. We don't take it lightly. And yeah, who knows? We'll see you on the next one.
Thank you so much, Robbie.